So, welcome to Conversations with Creatives, where I am talking with one of my past clients, Maggie Parr. And Maggie was in my group coaching program in 2022. So, we were still sort of like in the midst of pandemic pivoting. And I have a little intro here, so I don't want to miss anything because there's so many things that Maggie does, so I don't want to miss anything. So, forgive me from reading from a few. But anyway, Maggie is an incredibly talented artist, writer, and teacher. She has over 3 decades of experience working with a range of clients from Disney all the way to private collectors to mentoring and writing. Her journey is shaped by both her personal and professional challenges, and that has led her to master her craft, which you can see some of her paintings behind her. Her craft runs very deep, but also to sort of guide creatives and unlocking their own potential, and I would say maybe even freedom, right? Freedom from challenges and just life. We're going to get into all of that. Maggie's passion for helping people heal and grow through creativity shines through everything she does, including her recent book, which I have a copy of, A Creator's Guide to Stopping Self-Harm. And we're going to talk a lot more about that as we get into the interview. So I'm very excited to welcome you, Maggie. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Yes. So let's jump into the first question, and let's just start with when you and I met and you joined my coaching program. And I remember at the time you said that you had been feeling really like scattered and unfocused and like you had too many irons in the fire. So I wonder if you can just share a little bit more about, what was going on with you.
It was in the middle of the pandemic and all of my work had just bottomed out, and I had so many things I could do, so many things I wanted to do, and no idea how to make any of it profitable. And the idea of my creative business being a responsible business was something that, even after all those years of freelancing, I needed you to help me guide me through that and really think about it as a business that is profitable and sustainable. So I was in the midst of trying to figure out if the pandemic had changed my work environment, how I can make a living as a creative going forward.
Yeah, you were definitely in very good company.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, yeah, right. And it's these constant cycles too of just, we keep having these loops of things happening and people having to, adapt to completely.
Technology, world epidemics, all kinds of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, you've got a really rich and diverse career. We're talking about, working with Disney and that being a really long-standing client for you, to having, these private collectors and teaching and speaking, and you kind of do it all, and writing. Tell us. And I think well, it's funny. I think it's something that all creators can relate to, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of multifaceted nature of creativity and how that can sometimes feel at odds with, like you say, trying to create a cohesive, streamlined, sustainable business.
Definitely.
So with all of these things that you do and continue to do, is there a thread that, when you look back, that you can see that runs through all of those things?
Of course, hindsight is everything, right? I think looking back, it's clear. I wouldn't have been able to say this in my 20s, but I can say now that the thread is storytelling, and not just storytelling, but I'm fascinated with getting to the central part of the story, whether it's for a client, like if I'm doing a series of murals to illustrate Pinocchio for a Chinese audience in Shanghai Disneyland, or if I'm designing a castle based on all the princesses without using their faces, so there's what is the story? Or for a client who wants a custom painting that represents them, so who are they about? And then also the reason I do that, and this goes to what I was dealing with in your coaching workshop, is what is my story? Why am I creative? What is the through line to all these things that I do? And how can I, and of course, make a business and market it? And the story for me has been using art and creativity to become whole, to heal from the things that fragmented me and that kept me from being on purpose and staying focused. So it really is storytelling, and the medium is not as important as the story itself. And I learned that from Imagineering, because not just Disney, I don't just work for Disney, I work for Disney Imagineering, and they create theme parks. I think it's the coolest section of Disney. There is. That's just my opinion, but really interesting people at Disney, lifelong relationships I've gotten from that. But the main lesson I got was that it's all about the story, whether it's the experience you have on a ride or the decoration, the graphic design on the trash can in the queue line. It's all part of this story. It's like a center of the wheel, and the spokes go out from that. So for me, story is really important. And for me, story isn't just the plot, it's the purpose.
Yes, I love that. I don't know if I've ever heard you articulate it in exactly the way, but that's how things go, right? They continue to.
Yeah. Your questions are, you're a really good question asker, and that good questions can help you come up with a good answer.
Right. Well, that was an excellent answer. What do you think, and I'm going to go a bit off script here, but what do you think, where do you think that sort of like desire to get to the center of the story comes from?
Well, this is maybe people can relate, but I had a writer once said I was blessed with an unhappy childhood. And I had a traumatic childhood in many ways, and gaslighting from parental figures. And so I was always figuring out, is that real? What's real? What is the true story here? And so what started as a trauma or a problem ended up becoming an asset. So the skills and the strengths I developed to address that made me who I am, became my greatest strength and made me who I am today. Like, what is the story? What's real?
And I think that that's so incredible that even as a child that you had the wisdom to ask that question, because I think a lot of times people don't question, is that true? Like, what's the real story here?
Yeah.
Especially if you did, right? To actually question that, I think is sort of remarkable. And I do, in my experience, I truly believe that every creator has like a unique gift, right? Something that they were born with that, or they developed that they can do that other people just can't do. Like it's like falling off a log to them, but to other people, fathomable. And that seems like that's like one component of your gift, is that sort of natural sort of desire to get to the real story and that questioning process of like what's really underneath the layers.
Yeah, a lot of times, not just creatives, but I find especially with creatives, our greatest strengths come from these problems that we've had to solve in our lives. Which is why creativity is such an interesting and useful way to get to heal and to get to turn the problem into a strength.
Yeah,
it's a creative process.
It really is. Hold on 1 second. I realized that I had my other questions here in my printer, because I have another question I want to build upon that I knew I'd rewritten. So one of the things that I see so often in my clients again and again, and in myself as an entrepreneur, is that very often our values, our personal story, our personal experiences, are really intertwined with our purpose and work. So you've explained sort of like how that's been true for you. So I'd like to sort of like build upon that, and because I know that service is something that's really of importance to you, and it's something that you really find a lot of purpose and direction and meaning in. How have those things kind of gone from it being helpful to you, right? Like as a tool for getting through life and for healing. How have you managed to turn that into something that you can share with others?
Well, the service aspect turned out to be the key, what I was missing when I was working in your workshop, because my central story, the why of doing what I'm doing, I hadn't quite figured that out yet. And once I realized it's service-based, even with my artwork and my business, because I do a lot of service privately. I'm on volunteer, I'm on a board, I do this, I'm in 12-step groups. Service is really important to our recovery. And I wasn't incorporating that so much into my work, except that I had a personal standard of being really good and excellent at what I do and making the client happy. But service as a profession was missing until after I did your workshop, and I actually didn't get hired for a job that I thought I wanted in teaching, and realized that I have two aspects of my work. I have the artwork and my clients. I have my own personal artwork and this personal development thing that's always been important to me. and how can I combine the two? And that's where I ended up realizing that the through line of the storytelling in my work is trying to become whole through creativity. And since I did that in my life, now that's one of my superpowers, turning a problem into a solution, into an asset. So how can I help other people do that? Because a lot of people come to me struggling either with how do I be an artist? How do I make a living? Or how do I see myself as an artist? Or how can I get through this personal problem that I have? And creative means are always the way through it. So what I have done in my own life with my art and with my personal recovery, I want to be able to offer to other people, not just as a volunteer thing, but as a business.
Yeah, I love that. So what ways have you come up with where you can make that a business offering?
Mm-hmm. One of the ways is the book. When I didn't get hired for the job, I gave myself 10 minutes to cry. And then I don't want a full-time job anyway, so it's just as well. But I realized that I needed to write the book I've always wanted to read. Because one of the things I struggled with personally in my life was cutting and burning and self-harm. And I had found a way out of that using creativity. And in my research, I realized that 14 million Americans alone are struggling with that now, roughly. And it's happening all across the world, men, women, young, old. More studies have coming out since the pandemic, and it's a real problem. And since I got through it, I couldn't find books from someone who had gotten through it using creative means. Actually, anyone who'd gotten through it, there's either the harrowing memoirs or there's the clinician-driven studies. And I wanted something more hands-on. And so that pulled together my artwork and creativity, the expressive fine arts, like this stuff that I've done my whole life, which is about trying to figure out why do I do that, and my desire to be of service, and the illustration and artwork. So it all fit together. I do a lot of teaching, do a lot of mentoring, so this is perfect for it. So I wrote the book, got it published, and now I'm coaching people in that area. I'm offering workshops. So it's a small sort of sliver of human behavior, but it applies to a broader picture of creative means to heal and become whole, and then everyone needs to figure out their own purpose in life.
Yes, I love it. I mean, when you sort of like landed on that, so you sort of didn't get the thing that you thought you wanted and then realized you didn't really want it after all. You had your cry, and then you sort of had that. Was it an aha moment, or was it sort of like, because I always talk about these things, like sometimes it is like a sort of a bolt from the blue, and sometimes it's something that like emerges slowly from the mist, and like suddenly you're like, oh, there you are. Okay, great.
It's more like the aha, there's something out there in the mist, and then it slowly emerges.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And I do feel like I sort of always want people to hear that, because people think that ideas sort of strike you like a lightning bolt, and they can. But more often than not, I think it's really kind of a grind to get to that place. You stick with it. So to that point, I know we had a question about finding the clarity that we need to move our business forward, because especially when you've been in business for, you said you've been doing this for like 3 decades, right? So Maggie just looks eternally young, everybody. So we're trying to figure out the math, she just always looks like this.
Thank you.
But finding that clarity, because our business, if we're in business long enough, it's going to evolve many times over, because we are changing, as you said, the market is changing, technology, and everything's changing so much faster now. Like I feel like the turnover, it's not like every 7 years we have like an upheaval. It feels like it's every 18 months something. Right? So we kind of we can either sort of feel really defeated by that, or we can sort of accept it as a reality and just figure it out. So given that like finding that clarity takes time, sometimes it comes faster than others. What did you learn personally about trusting the process and allowing things to unfold even when the path wasn't immediately clear? How did you stick with it? Because you really did.
Yeah, I would say 2 things. In your workshop, you advise us to be patient. It doesn't always happen right at once. And so really it was the pandemic and taking the workshop in the pandemic. Pandemic slowed time down. We all had to go with it. There's nothing we could do about it. So that really being forced from the outside helped. But during that time, I threw myself into any kind of courses, workshops, study that I could to understand and learn in the areas I needed help with. And as a result, I learned the main takeaway I got was that I need a morning routine. I need a routine that gets all this, like it's like a pinball machine in there. I could do this, gets it to focus so that it slows it down, and I have my lists and I'm clear about my purpose for today. Because again, purpose is really important to me. And that's center part of the wheel. So everything is a spoke going out from that. So even if my day is derailed because something happens, I can get back to it because I know what the purpose is and pick up one of those spokes. So the morning routine and discipline really became important as a result of that.
I love that because that's something I do too. And I know that a lot of people struggle with routines, and
Creatives.
yeah, and also the idea of a morning routine, because I feel like it's positioned often in the media as like better people have good morning routines. They're morning people, and not everybody is a morning person or has the ability to have a morning routine. So, finding any routine, any anchor, right, like that works with your rhythms, but just to have that time, like you say, to sort of anchor yourself in something, to get all of the head trash, take it out, and then what's my one thing I need to do today?
Yeah.
And how can I, oftentimes I think subtract things to be there. For example, today I was supposed to be a meet and greet call. I prioritized a swim this morning because I woke up and my back felt janky and I wanted to feel good for our call. And so I thought, you know what, I feel bad. I rescheduled this woman once, but I'm going to do it again. And I took that off. And then I had all of this space and I was able to write an outline for a workshop that I've been really just procrastinating on. Right. So it's just,
that's self-awareness too. It's being able to, and this is what I address in my book and in my working with people's, being aware of what's going on, not just in our brains and our thoughts, but in our bodies. Like you woke up with your back janky and it's like, oh, I really need to take care of the body first. And it's so much of how we move in the world, just responding to outside stimulus all day long. And so it needs to start with something internal connection. And I have this whole routine I go through. It's not just the meditation, but then I do a little internal prayer with different parts of me, and we get all on board, and there's a captain of the ship. And so the whole story that goes on inside. And I have to have that every day and listen to it, be aware of it, that this is all I have. In order to feel like I have agency in my own life, I have to listen to what I need inside.
Yes. It's almost like creating protocols that are very unique.
Protocols, that's a good word.
And we all have our own way of getting there. But like you say, when there's not that either lack of that awareness or the willingness to tend to yourself first, because I think what you said about we're bombarded by things from outside, but also most of us are living in our head way too much. I know that I am too, and I have to sort of remind myself to kind of like somatically do the work, and when your body feels good, everything else is a tiny, right? I think that's really interesting. There was something else you said in there that I was really curious about, and I forgot. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Being at a certain age, it just goes away. There it goes. Bye. So I can see a thought exiting. I'm like, no, it's too gone.
I know, you're grasping away. Yeah, no, it was there was something you said. I'm just I'm looking at my notes. Maybe it'll come back. So what are some of the things that so you trusted the process, you had and have your protocols, these things that you must do in order to set yourself up for success as much as possible, right? Like none of us knows what's coming down the pike in the day, but you have these processes. As a result of all of these things that you do, and being patient and taking the cues of like, oh, this feels really good, service is really important, I'm going to write the book I've always wanted to write. What tangible sort of outcomes have you experienced, like professionally and personally, from trusting the process, trusting the unfolding?
Well, here's an interesting story. And this also comes from putting service first, is I'm on the board of the art center in my little town, Petaluma Art Center. And I wanted to organize a show on cars, on how what automobile and automobility means to people in our county, because there's a huge vintage car culture here. This is where American Graffiti was filmed. Every year they have a festival, whatever. So I organized a show, and I wanted to include more diversity. So I approached the lowrider community, which is huge in Sonoma County. And I ended up making friends with all these lowriders, and we had this amazing festival and show on this beautiful truck in the middle thing. And I met this guy, and he's a tattoo artist. I said, I want to have a tattoo. And this is all free, right? This is not part of my business. It's just time. And he really wanted to learn classical oil painting, which I've taken many years to learn. And so I was happy to do a trade because I couldn't afford his prices, and he wanted to learn. So we traded classes for this amazing tattoo that I have, by the way. I mean, he did this whole thing, took a total of about 30 hours.
Wow.
He's a brilliant artist, all self-taught. You know, he learned to tattoo in juvenile hall. Art saved his life. Love this guy. He has this brilliant, now 11-year-old daughter. She was 10 at the time I taught her. She picked it up like that. And we have this great relationship now. And in the process of teaching him and his daughter, I realized I'm a really good teacher. I love to do this. So now I've added teaching to my business. It's becoming a thriving part of it. I've taught a couple workshops, and he invited me to teach all of his tattoo artist friends classical painting. So now we have this new regular thing that we do with all these tatted up guys and me teaching them, and we love it. And I never would have predicted that. It just came from being of service and trusting the process. It's sort of following my heart where it goes. I don't know, it sounds kind of woo-woo, but it really, you know, creativity is a spiritual process, and meaning that it's not material, it's spiritual. And so you kind of have to establish that connection and turn yourself over to it.
I 1,000% agree. And I'm going to meet your story with a story of my own. But just before I do that, I just want to say to anyone watching this, you have to check out Maggie's Instagram, because she's got a picture of teaching, you know, all of these, like she says, these guys that are all like tattoos on their necks and everywhere. And they're all like there with the easels and like doing these amazing, you know, oil paintings. So it's a fantastic photograph, and it just made me so happy when I saw that, because I could so see it. To your point about the spiritual aspect of it, you know, when I first started coaching, I was a rep before that, but when I first started coaching in 2010, I would get very nervous before I would work with a client and before they'd walk in the door. And I realized afterwards, why are you so nervous? And I realized afterwards it was because I thought I had to have all of the answers figured out before they even walked in the door. Of course, like when you say it out loud, it's like absolutely absurd. Like, A, how could I?
Right.
B, how is that my right? Like, it's their business. Like, they're the expert. I'm the facilitator. So
holding the space.
Right. And so I realized it was actually really very much a co-creation process, which is why I work primarily one-on-one with clients, or in these like intimate groups that you were in, where maybe it's 10, 12 people at the most. Because there's so much magic that happens when two people are open, willing, invested, and focusing on the same thing.
Right.
So that's what I hear you were doing as well, was like you had put yourself kind of in that flow state of doing something that you really enjoyed for no real agenda, just because like it seems like really fun. And then you met this person, and then there was a connection between the two of you, and something that you both would get out of each other, you know, like this, like I say, this trade, and then him inviting you to have this sort of really wonderful, unique experience.
Right.
You know, with his guys and gals.
Yeah, it's like I would say, go through the doors that are open.
Yes.
And like I've spent so much time banging my head on closed doors, trying to make something work instead of just going through what's open, you know. And I'm so used to thinking, is this bringing this amount of money in? And it's like, well, if you're leading this spiritual life, which I think a creative path is, it's not that we don't make money and do all that work, but it is a spiritual path. So there's a certain amount of following that impulse inside. And the
Yeah.
muse, like the traditional idea of the muse, oh, muse is one of our spirits. So I think of the muse a lot when I.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's the two things, right? It's the muse, but then it's having the skill set and the
Oh,
motivation to like take it forward, right?
both are
It's
important.
yeah, exactly. So I love that story.
Mhm.
What is, if you could say like there's one thing that you learned that you could pass on to someone else
Mhm.
um, about balancing creativity and the muses and the sort of structure needed and the intentionality needed to run a business.
I
What would
don't
that
think creatives have a lack of connection to the muse and creativity. That's the fun part. I think the hardest part for me to learn was befriending Sam, as they say, sales and marketing. Ay, ay, ay. But actually, when I approach that creatively, it can be fun. So it's the structure, like learning the structure. That's why I came to your workshop, um, the marketing for and business for creatives, because I can sit at home and draw and paint all day long and no one will see it. In fact, my ex's parents did that. Brilliant, brilliant painters. And paintings just stacked up in the garage. And then when they passed away, we had these moldy paintings to deal with. And they
mm,
just didn't want to get it out there. And so especially in today's world, there's plus and minuses. The minuses, we have to do our own marketing for the most part. No one's going to do it for us. But the good part is that there's so many avenues and ways to do that now, and so many ways to learn it. I mean, social media marketing, that's brand new. I didn't have that growing up. When I first started, there was no internet, so that's
yeah,
how old I am. There's no
right,
email. Yeah, we
right.
could draw things by hand. There was no Photoshop, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's befriend, what I hear is like befriend those things that maybe feel intimidating or scary,
Right, right.
and sort of make them your own. And I
Yeah.
certainly subscribe to that. And I will say to folks, like, to me, building a business is inherently a creative endeavor.
Hmm.
You have to
Embrace
make
it.
a
Mhm.
creative endeavor. But if you approach it as like an MBA and it's this thing that you don't know and it's outside of you,
Yeah,
it's rigid, of
impossible,
course you're
right.
not going to want to do it, right? But there are a million ways to build a business, and entrepreneurship, I think, is
Yeah.
ultimately a creative act.
And build your skills. I mean, I was nervous about speaking in front of people, so I did Toastmasters for 5 years and learned to be a good speech giver.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And that there is that balance, isn't there, of just
Mm.
investing in your mastery and your craft and taking the art lessons and
Mm.
taking the writing courses and all of these things, but also investing in you as a business person,
Marketing. Right, right.
right?
And I would
And
say also there's another aspect, which is getting help, because it wasn't until the pandemic. I mean, I started taking art classes, which helped with my skill level, but it wasn't until pandemic, and I realized I had to change something, that I went to you and to learn how to do the things that I didn't know how to do. So learning is really important, constant lifetime learning, not like you said, not just the skills, but like before this morning, I was taking an online class on how to market for Instagram, so I'm always learning stuff like that. It's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So speaking of marketing, just because that's always something that, and I will sort of wrap up in a minute, but speaking
Mm.
of marketing, because all creatives sort of, not all, but a lot of creatives, like that's like their nemesis.
Mhm.
How have you found a way to sort of embrace marketing and
Mhm.
make it something that is creative for you and interesting for you?
Well, that's an ongoing thing, and I'm upping my game with social media. That's part of it. Most of my career, it's been word of mouth. I've been very fortunate, especially in my small world of theme park design. There aren't many people, and everyone knows each other. But since the pandemic, that's shifted a lot. So really, social media, email, building my email list, and then also paying people to do the stuff that I don't know how to do or don't want to do. That took forever to come to terms with. It's like it was okay. I can pay an account. Clearly, I can never do that by myself. But now and when I couldn't afford to pay something, I've traded artwork to help someone help me with marketing and come up with my brand book and my
Yeah.
statement of purpose and all of those things. So we can't do it all by ourselves.
Right. And I love that ultimately you got creative with it. As you said,
Yeah, yeah.
if it's not like a monetary exchange. What is it?
Right. How can we
Yeah,
make this happen? I mean, I find that money is currency. It's an energy. And so when I'm thinking of it as, oh, something I have to do, it's like I'm not thinking about it expansively enough. You know, there's all kinds of ways to make things happen.
right, right. I love it. So, what's next for you? What are you excited about that's going on or coming up?
I'm excited about the online offerings. I'm so jazzed about teaching and mentoring now. I'm creating a course I have two courses, one for my website, maggieparr.com, and then one to accompany the book. So it's stoppingselfharm.com. And they're two different online workshops that people can take. I like them to be affordable and high value, but to be able to get my work out there to as many people as possible is my goal. Not just my artwork, but how I can help people find their own purpose and their own creativity.
I love that. And what format will they be? Will they be purely self-led online materials, or will it be?
Starting with that, and eventually workshops, because I'm a creative, and this is how it's gone all along as I go through the open doors. So it's sort of, as I take a step, the next pathway opens up in front of me. So
I love that. It sounds like you've found more ease in the process and more faith in the process that the next step will appear.
right, because now I know the center of the wheel, the purpose, being of
Yes.
service to my art. So
And your gift for finding the story.
yeah. So it's constantly moving and changing, but I at least have got those central things.
Yes.
And I think it didn't happen right away in your workshop, but that work got me started, and I realized that we don't always know when things manifest, but once you start the process and start getting creative, it comes in eventually.
It really does. It really does. What have I not asked you that I should have asked you?
Who was on my lap?
Let's see, who's on your lap?
Well, she jumped down. I got to pull her up again. She's heavier than she looks. This is Phoebe Rose.
Hi, Phoebe Rose.
She's my studio dog. She sits on my lap while I work, and she's my best reason for procrastination. I'll take pictures of her and videos of her.
Oh, right.
I'm going to start posting more online. So
I love that. I was actually talking to a client the other day who hired me after seeing a webinar I had given, and she had to watch the replay because she was sick or something. But anyway, she said that like she loved it where I had to go and open the door in the middle of my webinar because my cat was wanting to get in.
oh yes, the cat.
And let it go back out again, because it was
Yes.
scratching, and she goes, I loved that part of it because it was so relatable and real. Like,
Yeah, it humanizes us. We love our animals.
that's right, we really do. So Maggie, thank you so much. So where can people find you?
MaggieParr.com. It's easy to remember. PARR.
Great. And find
pretty
your
much
book
everything's there.
and everything.
The book you can find on Amazon, A Creator's Guide to Stopping Self-Harm, or it's on the website, stoppingselfharm.com. And I would say half the people who are approaching me about that are people who have loved ones who struggle with it, like nieces or grandchildren or friends. And so it's helpful for both groups of people.
Wonderful. So I will make sure that we put those links.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thank you so much for joining me. That was like awesome.
All right, take care.